Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Welcome to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
And I'm Dr. Mark Davini. Welcome.
Okay, Doc, what are we talking about today?
I'm going to talk about by the numbers. And it's an important concept that I think has fallen out of vogue, or maybe it hasn't, who knows, but we're going to talk about it anyway, okay? That your practice, again, we say this a lot, and we talk about a lot of clinical matters that make a difference in your practice in our podcasts, but we also talk about the fact that it's a business. And like most businesses, you need to monitor it. You need to observe it. You need to know if it's working or not working. You need to be able to identify patterns and trends and recognize the need for change if that has to be. So
Are you saying
about numbers?
Are you saying that your business needs palpation and a leg check, maybe an adjustment, and see how the results are?
I like that. It will be. Yes. Yeah. So what happens when the leg is short and it goes long on flexion?
Exactly.
So yes, we are going to talk about running your practice by the numbers.
And before you think this is going to be a snooze fest because it's all about numbers, it's not, hopefully.
Yeah. Let me ask you, who said you can't expect change if you don't change what you expect?
I don't know.
That was me.
So proud of yourself.
I'm so proud of myself.
Hold on, let me write that down.
Yeah,
Mark
yeah.
Davini.
I probably heard it somewhere and it's just in my subconscious. But anyway, but it's true. What we're talking about here is by recognizing your patterns and your trends, you can create or complete better goal setting, and that your expectations become more real and based in a reality, not just hope and a prayer.
Let's talk about the obvious one, which is accounts receivable, right? So that's a pretty standard statistic. Now, when I say AR, I'm talking about both the insurance AR and the patient. There's two sides of a ledger, right?
So let me give you a statistician's joke.
Yeah. Oh, here we go.
Here we go. All right. 3 statisticians go deer hunting. The first shoots and his arrow lands 3 meters to the right of the deer. The second shoots and his arrow lands 3 meters to the left of the deer. The third statistician throws his bow down and jumps up and down and shouts, "We got him, we got him, we got him."
Is that the plus or minus you're talking about?
We're talking about means and averages. So you're never going to hit the mark exactly, but you're going to talk about trends that follow means and averages.
Yeah. So, looking at accounts receivable, it's easy to just look at it from a bird's eye view and say it's good or it's bad. I'm not sure I've ever met an owner or doctor that says it's good. It's always something that needs improvement. There's always somebody's fault.
But it actually, some of it, again, as far as observing trends and patterns, accounts receivable is very important because it tells you a couple things. One of them is, are you too strict with your payment policies? If you have too little accounts receivable, or are you too liberal with your payment policies? You have this huge accounts receivable. So again, it's one of those things where you look at it and go, maybe I need to be a little tighter. Maybe I need to loosen up a little.
Some advice I would say is to dig into a little bit of a deeper dive into your AR to know the financial class AR, because a very heavy personal injury clinic is probably going to have a very large 90-day plus AR, depending on where you practice, because of waiting for settlements, correlation of benefits, deductibles on PIP or lack of med pay. I mean, there's so many things that could influence that. So,
if you were a cash practice and you had a huge AR, then you're probably too liberal in your collection policies. Because you should be getting paid for what you do if you're a self-pay practice. So it makes a difference what your financial class is. You have to break it down that way. These are the things we're talking about. We're not going to give you the how-to. This is just basically a 30-minute podcast. But we're letting you know that these things are important, that you must monitor your AI and you must monitor it by financial class.
Now, just monitoring the AR, but I think there's some other numbers that are going to make the AR analysis more meaningful. right? Because just on its own, sure, that has value, but there's something like called overhead that every business has.
You.
And, you know, I'm very much a budget, a Dave Ramsey person, like budget's important, but do you know where all your money, the outgo, do you know where it's all going? Do you have a clue as to what your overhead is so you can manage not just the income side, but the expense side? I can't tell you how many times my wife and I we've done these Financial Peace University classes. We've helped with, people in our church mostly in our church, and with going through their budget. And they always think, well, I don't make enough money. Well, I think everyone's going to feel that way.
Right.
But until you know where the money's going, and you get a bit of a shock sometimes of where that money's going, sometimes it's not just an income problem. There really could be an expense problem. And I think a lot of times with doctors, because you go to school to be trained to be a chiropractor or a clinician, and you're not getting a ton of business training at all. Right?
Oh, you get virtually none.
Very little. I mean, It's usually the business training is usually, here's what an NPI number is, here's Medicare, here's insurance, here's this, here's that.
Number of schools, and no, they don't get any real business teaching.
Yeah, I think that to me it starts with overhead, because that leads you to the budget. Like, are you just paying for stuff because you want to, like at a whim, or are you assigning every dollar to something?
And do you know how much you're supposed to make? Warren Buffett said, rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. Okay? And it's the truth that sometimes doctors are operating and they don't even know that they might be operating at a deficit. Just jumping back on AR a little bit, what about aging your accounts? Not just, by financial class, who's paying you? Who's not paying you? What's the problem? If all of a sudden you're looking back in your accounts and you're seeing that there's a whole group of people or one particular carrier or whatever that's not paying you, then maybe you should look into that, because the bottom line is the bottom line. If you're not making enough money to pay your bills, you're not doing anybody any favors. If you're not making enough money to feel as if the work is worth the reward, you're going to become stressed out and burnout. So overhead is an important aspect of what we do, and you wouldn't know that unless you keep statistics.
What you just said kind of leads into helping answer the question we sometimes get from members, which is, should I stay in network with this carrier? And to answer that, the general answer is always, it becomes a business question.
Right.
And so in the answering or in analyzing that question is, okay, what is their allowables? And does their allowables exceed your costs to see that patient?
Do you make any money treating that patient? Do you know your not just cost per patient, but your profit per patient? If you don't know what your profit per patient is, then and basically break that down even per financial class, how would you know if you want to stay in that carrier? If I make $3 on this carrier and I make $15 on that carrier, maybe I might want to work a little harder on drawing in patients from the $15 profit one than the $3 one. Or maybe this carrier, I actually lose money. Because again, I'll go back to my aging of my accounts receivables, and I find out that this particular carrier takes 120 days to pay me. And when I do get paid from them, I'm making $2 a person on them. Where's the money profit? Where's the profit in that arrangement?
But also within the numbers, I would say pull back a little bit to see the effort. Meaning, even if they pay okay, but you get to a point where there's an authorization needed. And the authorization it's abusive on the patient with paperwork, it's abusive on the provider with paperwork, it's abusive on the CA who's finishing and submitting through that portal. If you take all that collective time and energy and apply that to the possible reimbursement by the carrier, not the copay, because the patient's going to pay that anyway, but the amount you're actually getting from the carrier. Sometimes I get members that are like, how do I, I'm getting a problem with this. How do I do this authorization? And literally, if they get authorization after the patient pays the copay, they're looking at $6.
When all is said and done.
$6.
So when you do a profit per patient, you don't do it just for the practice, you do it per carrier. And that will come into play when you figure out, like you said, I'm making $6, but it takes me 180 days to collect it.
Well, in a monumental amount of effort, because of it's no longer a prospective payment system. It's now I have to get authorization or now I have to get a referral.
Right. People complain about Medicare a lot, but I mean, payments by Medicare are pretty much by the book. You do what you're supposed to do, the check comes in. As far as follow-up work goes, not a lot of it. So, yeah, you might not get paid a lot, but as far as the effort you have to put out to get that money, it might be a lot less than some of these other carriers that require, 2 phone calls, 3 submissions, and promise of your firstborn son.
We were in Detroit a few weeks ago, right? We were teaching, and one of the questions that we were asked to address was whether to stay in or out of network. And analyzing that and creating a couple slides or whatever, one of the last bullet points I put in there was, what is the collective joy or lack of joy by staying in this network? Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't even about the money at that point. It was like, are you and your staff so beaten down by the effort that it really does negate even a small amount of profit that you might get from that patient?
Don't forget, we're in the business of getting people well. And to do that, we have to be healthy. And if we're unhappy, we're not healthy. So, yeah, I mean, the collective joy, sometimes you just get rid of. I have plenty of people that say, I don't do workers' comp. Well, some states workers' comp can be a lucrative financial class, but they don't do it because there's no joy.
Yeah, I get it. Or they've been talked out of it by a staff person who didn't really understand it.
Right.
That staff person has come and gone. And you don't realize that maybe you could do it.
Well, I mean, nice segue into staff there, right? Staff is definitely one of the overheads we have to consider. And it's become larger now than it used to be. In the day, Greg Whitehall used to say, Greg Stanley used to say in Whitehall management that 15 to 18% of your expenses go to staff. I would venture to say that's a little higher now.
If that meant payroll too, that's a way small percentage.
Way small percentage.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so when you start before factoring in staff time was maybe a much smaller number than it is now. So like you say, what's the effort involved in collecting that money? And, I'll go back to my accounts receivable. I remember one time the person that was doing my accounts receivable or billing, I remember walking into the space because my office had that office in the middle of all my treatment areas. And I walked in and there's my staff person on the phone tapping a pencil. And I'm saying, what are you doing? She goes, I'm on hold with this particular carrier. I'm tracking down a claim. I go treat a few more people. I come back. It might be like 15, 16 minutes later. And I see her sitting there. I go, are you still on the phone with so-and-so? Yeah. I go, hang that phone up. They pay us at the time half of what I charged. And I paid her more per hour than she was trying to collect. This made no sense to me. I said, then we're going to talk about that carrier. And guess what I ended up doing? Dropping the carrier.
Well, there's also a conversation about efficiency because in my billing office, the staff would be working. And so would I.
Yeah.
Sometimes I multitask to a fault. Probably you know that when I'm on the phone with you and I'm not talking, I'm multitasking. But do you know what I mean? Like you can do like the old restaurant. You've got time to lean, you got time to clean.
Right. And that's what I mean. It's like all of a sudden your staff gets dragged into these things, and it's not their job to analyze whether they're cost effective or not. It's your job to analyze if they're cost effective.
Well, and I can say with a surety that even with all the technology tools that we have available today, billing is a laborious task. Most of my expenses now is payroll. It's it's the labor of doing it. Because even with the technology that we have that doesn't always work,
It's only good when it works.
right? The amount of times that something has to be addressed beyond just posting a payment has increased because the nuances of coverage now are very, very different. Gone are the days of the indemnity 80/20s. You bill, they pay 80%. Life goes on after deductible. Like, there's so many different variables now, even within a carrier. I'll get a question like, does blah, 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 blah insurance cover chiropractic? It's like, you can't answer that question now because there are so many policy differentials within that carrier.
Yeah, so many different products and so many.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll create an individual contract with an individual manufacturer, for example, and it's unique to just that manufacturer. It's just a crazy, crazy world. So when we talk about statistics, we're talking about analyzing all of this to the point where you know which one's working, which one isn't working, which one is profitable. So, I mean, let's talk about your collections. Again, I'm surprised at how many people don't know their accounts receivable. I mean, because that's the money owed to you, but they also don't even know, say, their average collection.
Well, I do have a lot to say about collection ratios because to me, it's a bit of an antiquated statistic because of HMOs, because of allowables and network discounts. So even though a lot of software you can put in allowables and it helps you kind of filter out the contractual adjustments you have to make, it still doesn't do it perfectly. And I always say, you and I have talked about this and people think I'm nuts. I would rather have a 1% collection ratio and leave no money on the table than have a 90% collection ratio, because that typically means that what I'm charging is less than I could be charging. If that makes any sense.
Right. And that's what I mean, though. You don't know what's going on in your office anymore because of how everything is so convoluted that you have to be able to decide whether or not that's a good thing for you in your practice. I'll have people ask all the time, I'm thinking of dropping so-and-so. Okay. How much of your practice volume is made up of that particular insurance company? Well, I don't know. How much money of your monthly income comes from that insurance carrier? Well, I don't know. How good are they at paying what they claim they're going to pay for you? I don't know. So, well, I can't answer your question because I don't know enough to be able to say that's a good business decision or a bad business decision.
And honestly, I'm like trying to talk myself out of a job with the billing company here, but I always say, like, when the copay average for that carrier reaches your self-pay rate, you're a cash practice in that particular scenario already.
Right. And we talked about this in other podcasts where you have to make that patient understand the value of your service to get past that one thing they'll say back to you. But I have insurance and I want to use it. And they will recognize that if I'm going to end up paying the same, if not more, using my insurance, they have to realize the value of your service and recognize that they don't want to use their insurance. So it is that different place now where patients pay so much for their insurance. Like you've always said, they pay so much for it. They want to use it, even if it doesn't work. I don't get it, but even if it doesn't work.
Well, they want to see what the insurance will do with the claim. Medicare is probably the easiest example, right? Once you give them the maintenance spiel and they sign the ABN, but they want you to bill Medicare, then you can see that there's a glimmer of hope in their eye that Medicare will cover it. But you know when you drop the AT modifier and put the GA.
Can't.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have to adjust your expectations. If I don't put the AT modifier on it, it's not an if.
Yeah.
It's no.
Yeah.
It will not be paid for.
Yeah.
So you have to take this whole concept of numbers. Moving on to your numbers, do you even know your patient average? Like, how many patients a week do you routinely see? Again, I ask that question way too often and not get an answer. I
would think that's
an
like
average of this much per week.
I'm surprised. I would think that chiropractors, that's a basic They always want to see how many they're treating, like what,
No,
you know?
now they're going, oh, let me think about that. Oh, I probably see maybe about the, do you know how many patients you see a week? Do you know the average? Do you know your case average? How many times do you see a patient? If you think about this, if you never lost a patient, which is impossible.
Can I say?
Yeah.
Don't get mad at me.
Yeah.
Do chiropractors discharge anybody?
Well, no, but the case average.
I see them forever.
Yeah, no, I mean, it incorporates that.
Okay.
It incorporates the maintenance care.
They've gone into maintenance. Okay.
Yeah, you say, because if nobody ever left your practice, then your case average would be like 1 million, right?
Yeah.
But because people do leave your practice, then you can't figure out what the case average is. If you know your case average, that's how you tell whether or not you have a maintenance or an acute care practice. But let's assume you never lost a patient. Have you done the work and figure out how many patients you need before your practice is at capacity? Meaning, if I never got another new patient again, my maintenance patients, I'm a perfect maintenance practice. Everybody who ever came into my office stays on my programs of maintenance. How many people before you'd have to shut down your practice because you're at capacity? You need to know that, because that's a goal. My goal is to have this many active patients so that I only need this many new patients, because unfortunately the trend today is we've become exam machines in our practices. All we do is exams because we're getting a gazillion new patients with no retention.
I can tell you who does know your average case statistics, and that's
I wonder who that is. Yeah.
And that's the carrier, because some offices will get reports annually from certain carriers, and it'll show what their average is versus their cohort.
Yeah. So if they're watching you, why don't you watch yourself?
You know what's funny too is some of them will actually give you a tier assignment, and that if you took you, as you say all the time, it took you 12 visits to do what your cohort, your peer could have done in 8. They bump you to a worse tier, which means now you have to get authorization after so many visits. They don't give you as much flexibility.
Yeah, and in the future, they'll stop paying you less.
I wouldn't be with that carrier, I can tell you that much.
No, I know, but it comes down to, you need to know these numbers, because you may be treating way too many new patients and not retaining enough regular patients. Because let's put it, face it, the sweet spot is a maintenance patient. They come in. They very rarely have anything to say other than, hello, how's the family? You put them down, you adjust them, they walk out, they slap down their cash, and they come back in a week or 2 or 3 or whatever. That's the sweet spot. That's what you want mostly in your practice. And then you have your active treatments that will be replenished by your new patients. But ultimately, there's only so many people you can see in a day. And there's only so many people you can see in a week unless you end up expanding your hours. And most of us don't want to do that. So figure out your capacities. Figure out how many patients you want in your practice. That's your goal. That's a goal.
Let's highlight the retention statistic for a second, because I think that is super important when you are employing an associate, especially a newer associate. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but a seasoned doctor, I dare say, will probably have a better retention rate on average than a newer doctor. So if you hire an associate and you don't know what their retention is, that is a sieve, right?
Right. And the bottom line is, they're supposed to be there absorbing all your experience. Basically, what you're saying is, I've made all the mistakes, and let me tell you what I've learned over the years by making all those mistakes, and hopefully I can get you to avoid some of them. And I had a good friend who graduated from chiropractic college and struggled finding his place. And he went to go work for another friend of mine who would annually have this big event where he might draw in a large number of new patients. So as a way of jumpstarting the associate, my other friend, was jumpstarting the associate's practice, he said, you can have them all. And he gave them all to this young doctor. 3 months later, he goes back and finds out none of them are in the owner goes back and finds out none of them are in the practice. And he said to him, what happened? He looked at it and said, this isn't for me. And he quit chiropractic. only been out 2 years, 2.5 years. And he recognized that he just didn't have it. But he would have never known that if the owner doctor wasn't sharp enough to monitor the practice by the numbers. He was able to go back to him and said, look, you had 60 new patients, and it's 3 months later and none of them are active right now. What's going on?
Right.
You would never know that unless you watch it. So again, we're saying numbers matter. Other things that matter. Do you monitor how many broken appointments you have? How many canceled appointments you have? I can tell you right now, if that's a large number, it's a procedure issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being told what they need to be told, or the importance of what they're being told is not emphasized enough. So and you would never know that unless you monitor the percentage of broken and canceled appointments. And then if you have a canceled appointment, how many of them are rescheduled? Do they just drop off? That's it. Goodbye. Thank you. Appreciate you for the short time that we were together. No. These are the ways you manage your practice by statistics. You know what's going on. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and you get to work on your weaknesses.
It's helpful too, because if you're noting that and the patient's like, I'm not getting better, you promised I would get better, you can see their noncompliance and say, well, you've missed 12 out of your 24 visits.
Yeah. What if they got in a car accident? All of a sudden, they never told you, and they're somewhere else getting treated for the car accident because they didn't know you treated car accidents.
I dare say that doesn't happen in
yeah. But I'm just saying statistics and numbers are important. Trends and patterns are important because that's how you adjust your course. You make these little corrections. You say, I have a lot of broken appointments. Why? I have a lot of canceled appointments that don't reschedule. Why? I have a lot of new patients, but I don't have a lot of maintenance patients. Why? What's going wrong with your practice?
Because your type of practice too.
That's what I mean. Yeah. But do it by choice, not by default.
I want to talk about referral sources for a minute because I think this could be an underutilized marketing opportunity for chiropractors, for sure. There are, some carriers, some coverages that you need to get a referral. You're not going to get coverage unless there's a referral. It depends on your state and depends on the actual carrier. But, one thing that I know that doesn't happen as much as it should, and actually some carriers or some Medicaids that require referrals, it's in their regulations. You're supposed to send those clinical notes back to the primary that referred at the end of the treatment cycle.
Right.
And I don't think that happens enough because if it did, put a cover letter on that. Maybe they're not reading it, but maybe they'll see the cover letter and then maybe they'll say,
they'll know who it comes from, if nothing else.
Right. I think that there's a missed opportunity there to show the value clinically and otherwise that you as an office or a doctor are providing in the community, and maybe helping these primaries that don't know what to do with these people.
And then if you're tracking and keeping your statistics, you'll know that I've gotten so many from this doctor and so many from that doctor, or none from this doctor, or what other sources of referral you have. Monitor your practice. You watch it. You can't expect it to grow if you don't even know what growth means. If I'm doing this week and that next week and I don't have anything to compare it to, how do I know that's growth? I can only do it through monitoring my practice, and the best way to monitor it is through the statistics.
And it kind of works in reverse too. I got a call from a member office, I think it was 2 days ago. It was the CA. She was all upset because a patient needed x-rays. They didn't have it in-house. So he said, you need these x-rays. The patient went out of pocket to a place like down the road, not even a mile away. It was like one of these, urgent care or whatever centers. The nurse practitioner said, we don't believe in chiropractic. We don't think you should be going to chiropractors. I don't even know if they took the x-ray or not. But the patient came back and was like reporting this. And I said, well, be happy that they came back.
Yeah, number one.
And reported it. And number two, now you know that you can set additional patients up. If you go to this place for your x-rays, just know that this is what they're going to say.
Right. Or maybe find another place. But you wouldn't
Yeah.
know if you weren't monitoring.
See, the boldness in me would try to attack them with kindness and sending some, flowers and a note. Hey, we'd love to have you learn more about us.
Yeah, the Italian in me tells them to shove it.
Yeah. Well, diplomacy might be helpful, but anyway, it works both ways.
So, closing thoughts.
Yeah.
Number one, isn't it funny that the number 2 pencil is the most popular?
Of what?
Pencils.
Of all pencils? Oh, okay.
Not number 1. Number 2 is number 1. Okay, but anyway, I digress. The closing thought here, that all of these numbers only say what you need them to say if you use them and work them and observe them and make it part of your procedure. Because what Nietzsche said, there are no facts, only interpretation. And when it comes to numbers, they're just numbers unless you work them.
And if you find yourself struggling a bit in practice from the business aspect of things, start with the things that you can control. You can't control what you don't know. Know your numbers, know your statistics, because then if and when you create a budget, you can control where the money's going so the money doesn't control you.
Yeah, and we keep saying it over and over again, and it's an important thought to always remember, and always important for us to remind you that we are here to help people, but we are also a business.
With that, thank you again for listening to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
And Dr. Mark Davini. Thank you all.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.